And I think Charlie has taken a dislike to this guy. And I don't think Charlie even knows why he dislikes the guy. But I can tell you why I think it is. I'm going to play this clip, but every time he says right, and he, by the way,
right?
He says right in the middle of sentences. It's remarkable how he slips it in.
I think we need to get some analysis on this word specifically. The only thing I can imagine it being is a lie. When he says right, it's like, here's a lie, right? I'm telling you something blatantly not true, what I want you to think is true, right? And that's what Silicon Valley does.
I think you're close to what it might be, but it's hypnotic.
Oh.
And and the way he does it, he throws right. Like I'll try to do it. What he does right is to throw right into the middle of a right sentence, right? So it's very interspersed.
That's probably what is bothering Charlie Rose is that.
And he doesn't know it. Charlie doesn't know what it is.
Oh, okay.
But you can see he rubs him the wrong way.
Yeah,
and at one point, actually later in this interview, and I only have a piece of it. This went on forever with the same cadence. He actually said right 4 times in a row. Charlie said something. He says, right. I guess it was right 3 times in a row. So there's always 3.
Uh-huh. But
let's listen to this and try. You won't hear a word he says because of these rights and me ringing the bell. But he does, I think, maybe tell us what's ahead.
A country that's founded on privacy and liberty and civil liberties, and to have the public want to give them up is a bad thing, I think, and that could be the consequence of one of these. Imagine the worst nightmare scenario, right, of a nuclear weapon being detonated in New York City. You can imagine how the American people would give up all of their freedoms, right, to make sure that didn't happen again.
Right.
Another
That's a huge statement. They give up all their freedoms.
Well, not all, right? They'd give up an awful lot of their freedoms.
They'd be willing for the pendulum to swing towards security rather than...
Hold on one second before you move. I know where this comes from. This is how it works in Silicon Valley. Whenever you're telling a group of people who don't know the actual answer, such as... People really don't use an email, right? So they really love their social media, right? So they really love to use Facebook posts, but only if it's amongst friends, right? So things that you have no actual statistics on, that's when you use the right word. So when he says, imagine a nuclear attack, which you can't imagine, you don't really know what people will do. So he's convincing you by throwing in right. Does that sound?
I think that's an element.
Yeah.
But he does it in the middle of, he does it in such an interesting way because and you don't catch it a lot of times. In fact, I almost missed one with the bell.
Okay, let's go.
But, let him play.
Yeah, I will, sorry.
All their freedoms.
Not all, right? They'd give up an awful lot of their freedoms.
They'd be willing for the pendulum to swing towards security rather than...
Absolutely, significantly towards security, right? Another one of the consequences, right, is what Americans would demand of the president in terms of military action post a Paris-style terrorist attack here. All right, and I think the public would be much more demanding of actual boots, the boots on the ground as the president defines them. Right, go and take care of this problem.
So if Paris happened in New York City, there'd be a huge demand on Washington.
You can imagine the voices, right? You can imagine the public voices saying, we've got to solve this problem. We got to solve it right now. Let's put our boots on the ground. Let's send 50,000 troops in. That demand would be there.
But how does it, tell me how this connects to the president?
I think he understands this. I think he understands these additional...
So therefore what? He understands that, so therefore what?
So I think it's just...
How does that affect his judgment, his choices,
I don't necessarily affect his
actions?
I don't think it necessarily affects his judgment and actions, but it affects what he's trying to say to us, right? Which is yesterday, right, in a conversation with Norah O'Donnell, he was trying to make the point that we can't be so fearful here that we give up the very freedoms we're trying to protect. That's the point he's making, right?
And in fact, he said to her, as he said, in other circumstances, we can dramatically reduce, but we cannot eliminate.
Right. So one of the things, right? One of the things that actually worries me is I don't think U.S. infantry guys in the thousands holding and taking territory in Syria and Iraq is the answer to this, right? I don't believe that. But I fear that a Paris-style attack here could lead us down that road.
Because the public would demand it.
Because the public would demand it. Politicians would demand it.
Okay, why don't you think it's the right thing to do?
Because we learned, right, in both Afghanistan and Iraq that taking the territory is really easy. And holding it is somewhat easy, a little bit more challenging, but somewhat easy.
Difficult and expensive.
But turning it over to somebody else who can control it from that point on is very, very, very hard. Somebody who can control it in a stable way is very, very, very hard. So what's the end game, right? What's the end game of a U.S. invasion of Iraq and Syria that's successful, right, in pushing ISIS from holding territory back into the safe houses and, back into the mountains? What's the end game, right? Who's going to come in and take over and be in charge and have a security force capable of ultimately holding it so that we can go home, right? It's that end game that becomes very, very, very difficult.
If you don't have an answer to that, though, at least you better have an alternative.
Right. So because the consequences of an attack here are greater than just the people dying, right? I think there's got to be a significant, as we talked about the last time we were at this table.
Acceleration.
Right? Acceleration, amplification. Intensification and acceleration.
Prognostication.
Of what we're doing on both the military side, which the president has now done with regard to these special forces, and on the diplomatic side, right, in terms of getting a political solution in Damascus and Baghdad.
Okay. Oh, this is a tangent.
Chat room tally, 22 rights.
Now, one of 23. The things, besides throwing the right in out of the blue, my fear was, and so what are the consequences, right? How do you ask a question?
Right. Oh, I said
and
right.
then drop the right bomb in there? This guy is either insane. His pattern, he should be taken aside, unless he's doing this on purpose. He's been trained to do this as some part of a way of discussing things. But Charlie, you could just see him bristling with this guy.